The resolve property works almost identically to the resolve property we used with ngRoute. It lets you specify a map of dependencies that you want to inject into the state's controller. You'll most often use this by calling a function that returns a promise. The promise must be successfully resolved before the state change will occur. The result of the resolved promise will be injected into the controller. In the example here, I'm calling a function on the data service to retrieve activities. Once the returned promise is resolved, the activities will be stored in the activities property and injected into the controller. This is a technique you can use to gather all of the data the controller needs before actually instantiating the controller. It will keep your users from going to pages that don't yet have all of the expected data. UIRouter also gives you a mechanism for assigning bits of data to a state. You just add a new property to the state configuration object and assign it any data you want inside a JavaScript object. In this example, I've named my property data and I've assigned it an object containing two properties, name and description. Using the property name data is not required, but it is what you will see in the UIRouter documentation and therefore probably a good name to use unless you have a good reason not to. You can actually use any property name you want. UIRouter will just add the property to the configuration object. It's also important to note that properties added to a state are prototypically inherited by child states. We're going to talk about child states later in the course, but what this really means is that when you add a new property to a state, like the data property here, it will be inherited using the prototypical inheritance model used in JavaScript. Since child states, as we will see, inherit from their parent state, they will also have the property you add to the parent. There are a few slightly more advanced configuration options I want to point out, even though I think their use cases are somewhat narrow. The first are related to templates. We've already seen how you can use the template URL property to specify a path to a template file. However, you can also assign a function to the property that returns a path to a template file. This gives you the ability to be a bit more dynamic in how you specify which template should be used with the state. A second option for specifying templates is the template provider property. You also set it equal to a function, but the function you assign it is fully injectable. You can pass to it other Angular or custom services you need inside the function. Rather than return a path to a template file, it must return the actual template HTML. Controllers have some similar options. In the examples I've shown so far, I've always specified a predefined constructor function for a controller as the value for the controller property. However, you can also assign an inline function to the property as well. I think this would quickly become messy and hard to read, but I wanted to point it out as an option. The other option for specifying a controller is the controller provider property. You assign to it an injectable function that will return either a controller function or a string representing the name of a controller constructor. Just like the template provider property, this gives you more dynamic control over how you specify the controller for a state. Finally, state configuration objects also have properties named onEnter and onExit. You can use them to specify callback functions that will run when a state is entered or exited. They provide you with a convenient way to run some code as part of the state transition process. Let's now go back to the demo app and see how to use the resolve property, data property, and the onEnter and onExit callbacks.